My childhood sweetheart married me out of revenge. On our wedding anniversary he told me I killed the girl he loved, and watched me jump from a rooftop to save my family. But fate gave me a second chance. This time I won't beg for his love. I'll destroy everything he's ever wanted, piece by piece, starting with his mind. The wind howled like a feral thing as I fell. The blur of skyscrapers and neon lights flashed past me, the streetlights below drawing closer with terrifying speed. My heart pounded not with fear, but with bitter clarity. Ethan had killed my father. He had taken over my family's company, married me out of vengeance, and today he asked me to jump, so he could let my brother live. Blood for blood. My last thought before everything went dark was not about love. It was about war. And then silence. No pain. No ground. No death. Only the soft rustling of paper, the faint scent of ink, and the low murmur of a teacher's voice. My eyes flew open. The fluorescent classroom lights above buzzed faintly. A fan creaked lazily overhead. Around me, students sat in familiar blue and white uniforms, some scribbling in notebooks, others dozing off, heads tucked into arms. A blackboard read, June 5th, Final College Entrance Exam Review. Oh, it couldn't be. I reached under the desk, my fingers brushing old gums stuck to the underside, and the rough carvings from when Ethan used to sit here beside me. I was 19. Back in high school. Back before I married him. Before Lily died. Before my family was ruined. Back to the day everything changed. The corridor outside was bright, the early summer sunlight casting long shadows along the tiled floor. My legs moved of their own accord, down 2 hallways past the science lab toward the old music room that had long since been abandoned. I remembered this place. I remembered that it had been locked during our senior year. But Ethan had found a way in. The moment I rounded the corner, I saw the door was ajar. Inside, shadows moved. I stepped closer, quiet, steady. And then I saw them. Ethan's hand was cradling Lily's cheek. She was the girl my family had sponsored, quiet, pretty, and from a poor background. We'd welcomed her like a sister. I promise, Ethan was whispering, just one kiss. Just one. Lily bit her lip nervously. Ethan, if Rachel finds out. She won't. He smiled. She's not the type to make a scene. And I only love you. My chest burned. In my past life I would have stood there, crushed. Maybe cried. Maybe run. But I wasn't the same girl anymore. I stepped inside. Both of them turned, startled. Lily's face went ghostly pale. Rachel, she exclaimed. It's not what you think. I had something in my eye and he was helping me blow it out. I blinked at her slowly. Then smiled. Don't mind me, I said coolly. Carry on. And I closed the door behind me as I walked out. The sound of rushed footsteps came after me. Ethan caught up to me at the stairwell and yanked me into the corner. What the hell was that? He demanded, his voice low and furious. Why did you say that? I raised an eyebrow. Say what? You know exactly what I mean. Why are you acting like this? Why are you? His jaw clenched. Rachel, I could never love you. Stop interfering. And listen carefully. If you lay a finger on Lily, if you make her life hard in any way, I swear. I tilted my head. You'll what? I asked. Ethan blinked, surprised at the interruption. I'll never speak to you again. Ever. Pause. Then I nodded. Got it. He frowned. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Asked, my voice calm, too calm. Ethan, what would you do if I said I never cared? He stared at me as if I had grown 2 heads. I offered him a thin smile. You're not the center of my universe, I said before walking away. That night I sat in my room, legs crossed beneath me on the bed. I stared at the worn edges of my journal. In my past life this very day had crushed me. I had overheard rumors, pieced things together too late. By the time I confronted Ethan, they were already in love. He claimed it was complicated. That he loved me in a different way. And I, stupid and naive, had believed him. I had watched them run away together after the college entrance exams. The car crash had changed everything. Lily had died. Ethan had survived. And when he returned, he acted as though she never existed. But he remembered. He always remembered. And for years he kept me close, pretending to love me, all while orchestrating my family's destruction. Because he believed I killed her. I looked down at my hands. They were still soft. Still unbloodied. Good. They'd be clean long enough to tear him apart the right way. This time I would not cry. This time I would not chase him. Ethan Bennett would fall. I always thought pain dulled over time. That the wounds of betrayal would eventually scab over, fade into something distant and dull. But standing once again in this body, 19, naive and supposedly in love, the past came rushing back not as memory but as fire. I still remembered the moment Ethan told me he loved me. It had been my 26th birthday. I was in Hong Kong on a business trip. He flew in unexpectedly, organized an entire fireworks display over Victoria Harbour. I'd stood there, stunned by the kaleidoscope of light reflecting in his eyes. "Rachel," he said, voice low and raw, "maybe I once loved someone else, but now the only person I love is you." And I had believed him. Because I wanted to. Because after 12 years of loving him, 12 years of hoping, I had wanted that moment to mean something. But now I knew the truth. I wasn't the girl he loved. I never had been. The fireworks, they weren't for me. I'd shared a birthday with Lily. He flew to Hong Kong that year not to celebrate me, but to mourn her. My hands clenched into fists as I sat alone in the campus library, staring down at the empty exam prep book in front of me. 12 years. 12 years I gave to him. I learned to cook for his sensitive stomach. I negotiated with suppliers, business partners, family elders. All for him. I gave up dreams, abandoned cities, buried desires. And he married me out of vengeance. He used my love to get everything I'd built. He stood by as my father died of a heart attack. He tossed my mother into a psychiatric ward. He said I owed him blood. And when I asked why, "You killed Lily," he said. "Blood debts must be repaid in blood." But I hadn't killed her. It had been an accident. A rainstorm. A car crash. He had been behind the wheel. He had sped to the airport like a madman, ignoring the brakes, the roads, the signs. Lily died instantly. And Ethan survived with vengeance instead of grief. I exhaled slowly and turned to the task at hand. This time I would make sure he knew what it felt like to lose everything. But I couldn't destroy him alone. I needed an ally. Someone who could move where I couldn't. Someone inside his circle. Someone he would never suspect. And ironically, that someone was Lily. She had always played the poor, pitiful girl perfectly. Big brown eyes, soft voice, harmless smile. Even my parents, who were usually wary of outsiders, had embraced her, funding her tuition and even offering to sponsor her college. She was supposed to be the girl I protected. Instead, she was the one who stole the boy I loved, then played the victim when caught. But I had seen something else in her eyes that day in the stairwell. Not innocence. Not guilt. Fear. Not of me. Of someone else. The opportunity came the following week. I was walking home late from cram school, the air thick with pre-summer humidity, when I saw her, Lily, standing beneath the flickering street lamp near the station entrance. He was with a man. Tall, suited, older by just a few years. Handsome in a sharp, cold way. He leaned down and handed her a small parcel and she laughed, too comfortably. I knew that profile. I'd seen it before. Noah Bennett. Ethan's half-brother. The forgotten one. In my past life, Noah had failed to inherit the Bennett family company. Mrs. Bennett never accepted him, and Mr. Bennett only brought him back out of guilt when Noah's mother died. Noah had always been on the outside looking in. While Ethan basked in attention, Noah was buried in operations, shadow roles and side branches. In the end he disappeared, exiled, ignored. But here now before the fall he was still a threat. And Lily was his accomplice? The next day I slipped a folded note into Lily's locker. Library archives. 4:45. Come alone. To my surprise she came. She stood by the windows, hands folded tightly in front of her, not meeting my gaze. "Rachel," she said softly. I don't want to fight." I closed the dusty cabinet drawer and turned slowly toward her. "Then don't. I'm not here for Ethan." She blinked. "What?" I said, "I'm not here for Ethan. You can have him." Confusion flickered across her face. Suspicion quickly followed. "Then why?" I stepped closer and pulled a folder from my bag. Photographs. Schedules. Names. Dates. Her and Noah at the station. Her handing over sealed envelopes. Her stepping into his car. She paled. "Why do you have these?" Because I know how to watch people who don't expect to be watched. I tapped the folder. I know you're working with Noah. I know he's Ethan's half-brother. I know your tears are part of an act, and I know that you never really loved Ethan the way you pretended to. He stiffened. You don't understand. I don't need to, I cut in smoothly. I just need to know if you want Ethan to fall as badly as I do. Lily's jaw clenched. For a moment she said nothing. Then quietly she asked, "What do you want?" I smiled faintly. "An alliance." She hesitated. "I don't trust you," she said at last. "You've loved him for years. Everyone knows. What if you're just trying to trap me?" "If I wanted to destroy you," I said calmly, "I would have handed these to Mrs. Bennet already. Or Ethan. Or the school. You'd be expelled. He'd be disowned. And Noah would be blacklisted." That made her pause. "You think I don't know how this world works, Lily?" I continued. "I was Ethan's wife for 3 years in another life. I've seen how far he's willing to go when he's angry. If we want to survive him, we have to be ahead of him." Silence stretched between us. Finally Lily said, "You don't love him anymore?" "No," I said. "I loved him once. No. I just want him to burn." A long breath left her lips. Then slowly she extended her hand. "Fine. Alliance." I shook it firm and cold. Back in my room that night I stood by the open window as the wind picked up. Below the city buzzed. Cars' lights chatter. Somewhere Ethan was probably texting Lily telling her he missed her. Still convinced the world revolved around his charm, his tragedy, his twisted devotion. But it didn't. Not anymore. I reached for my pen and wrote on the next blank page of my journal. June 10th. Partnership formed. The hunter becomes the hunted. Let the game begin. "I just want to be with her," Ethan said. His voice trembled with a kind of sincerity that made me want to laugh. Not because I found it funny, but because I'd once believed that same trembling voice when he said it to me. Now I was watching it from a safe distance like an actress who had seen the script flipped upside down. We sat at a cafe near campus, 2 cups of untouched tea cooling between us. "She's been skipping meals," he went on. "She barely sleeps. Her mock scores keep dropping. I can't even tell if she'll make it into a decent university." He looked at me then, eyes wide with desperation. What if we don't end up together?" I tilted my head, letting silence hang between us before answering. "That's a possibility," I said softly. "Peking University's cutoff is higher than anything she's ever scored. You're practically guaranteed admission." Ethan's expression fell. I leaned in, tapping my finger lightly against my teacup. "And if you go to Beijing and she ends up in some second-tier college in another province?" I let my voice trail off, watching him squirm. He was already imagining it. Lily in a different city. Different campus. New boys. New attention. He clenched his jaw. I watched quiet. Planted seeds always took time to bloom. At school the next day, I approached Lily near the practice exam bulletin board. I handed her a folded piece of paper. "Your new address," I whispered. "The landlord said it's ready." She tucked it into her backpack without looking. "Thanks." Around us, students buzzed about upcoming exams, essay prompts, and admissions counselors. But Lily and I stood in silence. Ethan stood at a distance near the vending machines, watching her like a hawk. It was all going exactly as planned. "Do you think she'll stay faithful to you?" I asked Ethan 2 days later during lunch. He had skipped gym just to sit beside me under the trees in the back courtyard. He narrowed his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" I opened my bento box with a neutral expression. "She's beautiful. Once she gets to college, guys will line up for her. You know how it is." Ethan was quiet. I shrugged, biting into a piece of tamagoyaki. "You know," I continued, "I heard someone say she was seen with a guy in a suit the other day. Not Noah. Another one." He turned to me sharply. "Who?" I blinked. Did I say that out loud? "You're making this up." I shrugged again. "Maybe. Maybe not." He looked down at the grass, fists clenched. "You could study together," I offered casually. "Or you could just do something meaningful. Prove to her how much she means to you." He glanced at me sideways. "Like what?" I hesitated, then looked around before leaning in. "You know you're going to ace the exam," I whispered. "You're the best in class. You could drop a section and still get into a top school. Ethan stared at me confused. Imagine how moved she'd be, I went on. If she knew you were willing to give up something for her. A real sacrifice. I watched the idea bloom behind his eyes. It could skip one section, he said slowly. Maybe physics. Just the multiple choice. It's only a few points. You'd do that for her? I asked softly. He nodded. I smiled, then quickly looked away to hide it. 2 nights before the exam, Ethan sent me a message. Don't tell Lily. I want her to be surprised. I typed back. Of course. I won't say a word. And I didn't. To him. I met Lily outside the convenience store the following afternoon. She was wearing a gray hoodie and a face mask, careful not to be recognized. He's planning to sabotage his own score, I said, handing her a cup of milk tea. She removed her mask, eyes wide. He actually believed you? I smiled faintly. I gave him just enough to feel noble. And just enough fear to make it hurt. Lily shook her head. Is he really that easy to manipulate? I turned my eyes to the street. In our last life, I murmured, I thought he was the smartest man I knew. On the day of the exam, Ethan sat beside me in the waiting area. He was oddly calm. I'm going to do it, he whispered. Do what? I asked. He tapped his pen. Skip the physics multiple choice. For her. I gave him a small smile. She'll be touched. He stared ahead. She means everything to me. I resisted the urge to laugh. After the exam, I found him outside staring into the sky. How do you feel? I asked. He turned to me and smiled, not the confident grin I once loved, but a soft, dazed smile. Like a boy in love. I feel free. I nodded slowly. She's lucky. Well, she wasn't. He was working with me now. And together we would make him regret ever thinking he could control either of us. That night, Ethan sent me another message. You're the only one I can trust. Thanks for being there. I stared at the words for a long time before replying. Always. Then I powered off my phone. Lily and I had another meeting. We met in a quiet corner of a private reading room. He handed me a flash drive. Mock scores. Real ones. Not the ones she turned in. In truth, Lily had always been brilliant. In our previous life, her low performance was an act, engineered to manipulate Ethan. It had worked then. It was working now. I've already submitted my application to a top international university, she said. He'll never make it in. And if he tries to follow? She smirked. He can't even pass physics. I raised my cup in mock toast. To love, I said dryly. He clinked her cup to mine. And the fools it ruins. I opened my journal later that night and penned the next line. June 17th. Ethan falls into the trap. Let the spiral begin. The sky darkened with a fury I had already lived through once. Clouds churned like wet wool overhead, and the air hung heavy with the scent of earth and electricity. It was going to rain. Not the polite drizzle of spring, but the kind of storm that remembered. That repeated. That punished. It was the same as last time. The same day. The same wind. The same storm. The day Ethan and Lily had planned to run away. And the day fate had decided to ruin them both. I stood by the window watching the first drops of rain splatter against the glass. In my last life I had spent this day clutching my phone, waiting for a message from Ethan that never came. This time I didn't wait. I had sent Lily away early that morning. Her suitcase was already in the car Noah arranged. She'd be gone by evening. Safe, distant, unreachable. Ethan, on the other hand, was pacing in his room under virtual house arrest. Mrs. Bennet had caught him writing a forged letter of withdrawal to his school and immediately grounded him. She believed she was doing the right thing, keeping her son away from a gold-digging temptress. But she didn't know Ethan had already made up his mind. He would run anyway. Around noon I received a text. She's not answering. Something's wrong. I have to go. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another message. I need your help. Cover for me. I typed back. Of course. Just tell me where you're headed. The moment I hit send, I turned to my notebook and flipped to the page labeled June 22nd. I drew a single line through it. Mission confirmed. By 3 p.m. the rain had turned into a deluge. Water poured in sheets over the streets, flooding gutters, bending trees sideways. I sat at my desk, legs folded under me, sipping tea as I watched the chaos through the window. A bolt of lightning ripped the sky apart. Then the call came. Not from Ethan. From Mrs. Bennet. Rachel. Her voice was frantic, hoarse. Ethan, he's missing. His car. It's been in an accident on the way to the airport. Oh God, My fingers tightened around the phone. Which hospital? I asked quietly. I arrived 30 minutes later, my umbrella battling the wind, my shoes soaked through. The emergency room was chaos. Nurses rushing in and out, the scent of antiseptic clinging to the air. Mrs. Bennet stood in the corner like a statue carved from grief, her perfectly styled hair now tangled and flat with rain. She looked up when she saw me, her mascara running. They said he lost so much blood. I stepped forward and gently held her hand. He'll survive. She gripped my arm. They had to amputate. His leg. His left leg. I blinked. Not dead. But broken. Almost poetic. When I was allowed to see him, I entered the ICU slowly, careful not to let my steps echo. Ethan lay there pale, tubes and wires tangled around him, one side of the blanket conspicuously flat where his leg used to be. His face was sunken, nothing like the golden boy he once was. He looked like a statue abandoned mid-sculpt. His eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as I reached the foot of the bed. Rachel, he croaked, voice barely audible. I said nothing. He tried to smile. I was going to stop her. I was going to make it in time. You were too late, I replied evenly. She left this morning. Something in him broke at that. His chest caved inward slightly as if hit. She didn't wait? No, I whispered. She's not coming back. Tears welled in his eyes. Not for me, of course. Never for me. Don't cry, I said softly. You'll waste the pain. That night I stayed at the hospital beside Mrs. Bennet. She sat like a ghost on the edge of a waiting room chair, her hands twisted in her lap, knuckles white. I should have let them be together, she whispered. Maybe then he wouldn't have done this. I offered her a tissue. You did what any mother would. She looked at me, eyes hollow. He's not just mourning her. It's changed. Like part of him died with that leg. I nodded gently, rubbing her back. But he's alive. That means there's still hope. Hope. She clung to that word like it meant something. But I didn't say what she really needed to hear. This is just the beginning. 2 days later she came to me again, more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. Rachel, do you have Lily's contact details? I pretended to hesitate. Why would I? She looked away, ashamed. I know I was hard on her. But Ethan, he won't eat. He won't sleep. He won't speak to me. He only says one thing. What? Lily. She choked out the name like it burned her. I studied her, the woman who had once called me the perfect daughter-in-law, and smiled gently. I may have her number, I said, slipping my phone from my pocket. Let me try. I didn't call Lily. I called a burner. After 2 rings, a soft voice answered. My own voice, recorded days ago. Hello, the voice said, distant and distracted. Mrs. Bennet's eyes lit up. It's her. It's really her. I put the phone on speaker. Lily, I said sweetly. Ethan wants to talk to you. Do you have a moment? The voice hesitated. That's not necessary. I'm sorry. I've moved on. Mrs. Bennet's face collapsed. She nearly dropped the phone. I ended the call. She hung up, I whispered. Mrs. Bennet sat down slowly, face pale with disbelief. She doesn't want him, she said as if the words physically hurt. She's afraid, I lied. But maybe I can persuade her. She clutched my hand. Rachel, please, help him. I gave her a long, soft look. Of course. That evening I sat alone by the hospital window while Ethan slept. The lights of the city blurred behind the rain-streaked glass. In my previous life this was the part where I fell in love again. Where he told me I was his only light. Where he asked me to marry him. Where I foolishly believed I had replaced Lily in his heart. But this time I knew better. This time I wasn't the candle in the dark. I was the fire. Ethan didn't cry at first. He just stared out the hospital window, his hand resting over the flat space where his leg used to be. I knew that look. In my past life I had seen it too late. When he'd already turned cold, already carved his hatred into every corner of our marriage. But now I saw it for what it was. Loss without closure. Grief with teeth. She left, didn't she? He said hoarsely. I adjusted the tray on his bedside table. You should eat something first. Rachel, he said sharply, his eyes cutting to mine. Please. Don't lie to me. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at him for a moment. Is confused, I whispered. Confused. I reached into my bag and slowly pulled out my phone. She answered when I called, I said carefully. I recorded it just in case. His eyes widened as I tapped play. The audio was simple, calculated. It's not that I don't care, Lily's voice said softly, but too much has happened. I don't know how to face him anymore. It was a voice message Lily had recorded herself under my instruction, meant to sound broken but not final. Ethan clutched the blanket, pulling it up like a shield. She still cares, he muttered. She still thinks of me. I tucked my phone away and reached for his hand. She just needs time. That was all he needed to hear. Hope, even false hope, is the easiest poison to swallow. From that moment on, I became Ethan's anchor. He wouldn't speak to the nurses. Refused to see his mother. But every time I entered the room, his eyes would flicker with something almost like life. You're the only one who hasn't left, he whispered once. I gave a gentle smile. I'm your friend, Ethan. And I was. The kind of friend who walks with you, to the edge of your sanity. A week passed. Then Ethan was discharged and returned home in a wheelchair, thinner and quieter than he'd ever been. Mrs. Bennet did her best to care for him, but he barely looked at her. I had become the sole translator of his moods, his only confidant. Can you help me write to her? He asked one day, handing me a blank notebook. I nodded and took it. I'll make sure she reads it, I lied. Each letter was a slow bleed of emotion. Guilt. Desperation. Love. I filed them in a drawer unread. Noah visited me the next evening. We met at a quiet tea shop tucked behind a row of lantern-lit alleyways. He wore a black coat and no tie, his usual stiff demeanor softened by fatigue. How is our patient? He asked, sipping green tea. Fragile, I said. And very suggestible. I've arranged the prescriptions, Noah said, sliding a small packet across the table. Low dosage to start. Insomnia meds. Some for anxiety. Mild antidepressants. All real. He nodded. All legal. All with side effects. I turned the packet over slowly. Is this how it started for you? I asked. The last life. Noah didn't answer. Just stared into his cup. I tucked the packet into my purse. Then let's make sure it ends better this time. Ethan began taking the medication a few days later. He never questioned the pills I gave him. Why would he? I was the only one who visited regularly. The only one who brought him food he liked. The only one who still said Lily's name with warmth. You're shaking again, I said gently one afternoon as he tried to hold his cup. He stared at his hands, confused. It's probably the weather, I added. Let me get you some tea. Mrs. Bennet started noticing the difference. He's not like himself, she whispered as we stood in the hallway. He zones out. Talks to people who aren't there. Post-trauma, I said, squeezing her arm. It happens after amputation. She looked like she wanted to cry again. He said you've been helping him sleep. I nodded. Just tea and conversation. She gripped my hand. Rachel, you're the only one he trusts. Please don't abandon him too. Abandon him? Oh, I planned far worse than that. I sat beside Ethan on the balcony one night, watching the moonlight spill over the railing like silver ink. He was wrapped in a blanket, his expression unfocused. Rachel, he murmured. Yes. If I got better, if I could walk again, would you come with me to Victoria Harbor? My breath caught. Why there? He smiled faintly. I always wanted to show you the fireworks. I stared at him for a long time. You did, I said quietly. Once. He tilted his head, confused. In a dream, I added quickly, my voice steady again. Maybe we both dreamed it. He reached for my hand. Don't leave, he whispered. You're all I have. I squeezed his fingers gently. Then hold on to me. The next day he collapsed during his physical therapy session. His heart rate spiked. Blood pressure dropped. They rushed him back into emergency care. Doctors adjusted his dosage, trying to balance the side effects. I stood in the hallway as the medical team scrambled. Noah appeared beside me, silent. "He'll break soon," I said. Noah didn't respond. But I saw it in his eyes. He didn't pity his half-brother. Not anymore. That evening Mrs. Bennet cornered me in the stairwell. "Something's not right," she said. "He's slipping away. He needs help," I said softly. "Real help. Psychiatric help." She stared at me, horror in her eyes. "You want me to send my son to a mental facility?" "No," I said, lowering my voice. "He needs it to get better. But you need it so he doesn't destroy himself." He broke. And just like that, Ethan Bennett's fate was sealed. The hospital stood at the edge of the city, tucked away behind iron gates and white silence. It was the kind of place where the wealthy sent their problems to be fixed discreetly, where reputations were preserved behind padded doors, where sons of dynasties were labeled fatigued, exhausted, or sensitive to pressure. Never mentally unstable, never broken. Unless they truly were. Ethan arrived in a private ambulance, sedated, head resting weakly against the cushion. Mrs. Bennet signed the forms with a shaking hand. She couldn't even look at him. I stood by her side, calm and composed. "You're doing the right thing," I said gently. She looked at me like a child begging for reassurance. "He'll get better, right?" I smiled faintly. With time. She would never know that time was the one thing Ethan didn't have. The hospital staff had already been briefed, courtesy of Noah. They called it therapeutic care, but it was imprisonment. Every meal was monitored. Every pill administered with exacting precision. Every hallucination or panic attack logged but never cured. Noah didn't want him dead. He wanted him diminished. And I wanted him hollow. Ethan's room was on the 3rd floor, large with no sharp edges. Pale wallpaper, bolted shelves, and a small window that offered a view of clouds and concrete. I visited every 3 days. He would light up the moment I entered, his face softening like I was the only thing tethering him to the world. "Rachel," he murmured that first week. "I was scared you wouldn't come." "I said I'd be here, didn't I?" I replied, placing flowers on the bedside table. He stared at them. "Are those lilies?" "No. Peonies. Your favorite." He blinked. "No, they're yours." "Then they're ours." The medications began to work, or rather to fail him, in the ways I needed. His hands began trembling. His appetite vanished. He stopped sleeping through the night. Sometimes I'd catch him muttering under his breath, or staring at the mirror as if seeing something behind it. "I keep hearing her voice," he whispered to me once, curled up in bed. "Lily. She calls me in my dreams." I brushed his hair back gently. "Maybe your heart isn't ready to let her go." He looked up at me with hollow eyes. "But I have you now." "Right." I smiled. "Yes. You have me." Outside those walls the city moved on. Mr. Bennet suffered a stroke 2 weeks after Ethan's commitment. The company, once a fortress of patriarchal control, now stood without a king. Noah stepped into the vacuum like a man who had waited his whole life for it. Board meetings resumed, but now with a different face at the head of the table. Executives who once scoffed at Noah now called him President Bennet. His power consolidated fast and efficiently, and not a soul dared to question the sudden absence of Ethan. It was as though Ethan never existed. He, the golden boy who had once walked into every room with arrogance and a 1,000-watt smile, was now reduced to hospital gowns, dosage charts, and supervised showers. And he didn't even realize it yet. "Do you think I'll ever get out of here?" he asked me one rainy afternoon, watching water trail down the window. "If you recover," I replied. "What if I never do?" I tucked a blanket around his shoulders. "Then this becomes your world. But that's not so bad, is it? Not with me here." He reached for my hand. "You're the only one who believes I can be saved." I gave him a smile so soft it made my teeth ache. "Of course. I've always believed in you. Even when you destroyed my father. Even when you watched him collapse in front of you. Even when you threw away his heart medication like it meant nothing. He thought I never knew. But I remember everything. There were days he wouldn't speak at all, just stared at the ceiling or out the window. The doctors began to note catatonic states and emotional withdrawal. They increased his dosage. I adjusted the timing. Just enough to keep him drifting. Just enough to keep him hopeful. He didn't need to be a vegetable. Just broken enough to forget how to fight. Sometimes he hallucinated. Rachel, he asked one night, eyes darting around the room, did you hear that? What? Lily. She was here. I swear she was here. She said something about the fire, and your father. My blood went cold. What fire? He stared at me, then blinked slowly. I don't know. I pressed a hand to his cheek. It's the medication, I said softly. Try to rest. He nodded, trusting me completely. Noah sent me weekly updates from the boardroom. Stock shifts. Votes. Internal cleanups. We sat together over wine once in a private suite reviewing documents. You know, he said, if this continues, the company will be ours within 6 months. I raised an eyebrow. Ours. He poured me more wine. The only 2 left standing. Funny, I murmured. Ethan once said the same thing. He was just looking in a different direction. Noah looked at me for a long moment. Do you ever feel bad? I stared out the window. No. Because I remember. One afternoon Ethan asked me, do you think Lily will write me back? I paused. She might. Eventually. I want to apologize, he said, voice barely above a whisper. For everything. Everything. I asked gently. He nodded. For how I treated her. For how I treated you. I studied him. In his current state he wouldn't remember the worst of what he did. But somewhere, buried under the fog of medication and madness, pieces of guilt had begun to form. He reached for my hand. I was cruel to you. I knew you loved me. And I used you. I leaned forward, brushing hair from his forehead. Yes, you did, I whispered. But don't worry. I'm not angry. His brows furrowed. Why? Because now. I have you all to myself. His eyes softened. He smiled. And I smiled back. The smell of antiseptic clung to Ethan's skin like rot. He sat on the edge of his bed in the hospital's private grooming suite, dressed in a navy suit he hadn't worn since the accident. His hair was neatly styled, his face freshly shaven, but there was no light in his eyes. He stared at the mirror as if unsure the man staring back was real. You look good, I said, standing behind him. His eyes flicked to mine in the reflection. Why are they making me do this? Because some people still believe you matter, I said gently. His mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile or maybe just a tick. Will Lily be there? No, I replied. This is a board meeting, not a reunion. He nodded slowly. Right. Business. He looked back down at his shaking hands. They think I'm still part of it. They need to see the truth, I whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. And they would. Noah arrived in a black car outside the gates of the hospital, flanked by 2 aides. He glanced at me only briefly before turning to Ethan. You ready? He asked coolly. Ethan stared out the window. Are they going to ask me questions? Only one, Noah replied. Are you fit to lead? Ethan gave a soft, dry laugh. Is that all? Noah didn't smile. The boardroom of Bennett Enterprises was grand and cold, all glass and marble and indifference. 12 members sat around the U-shaped table, murmuring amongst themselves as Ethan was wheeled in, Rachel beside him, and Noah standing at the head like a conductor ready to begin the funeral march. I watched each expression shift as they took in Ethan. This wasn't the confident air they remembered. The man who once delivered sharp presentations, who closed billion-dollar deals before lunch. This was a ghost in a tailored suit. He looked at the water bottle in front of him as though it were a math problem he couldn't solve. Chairman Liu cleared his throat. Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming. We hope you're well enough to update us on your recovery. Ethan blinked. I like the color of your tie. A silence fell. Someone coughed. I glanced at Noah, whose face was perfectly unreadable. Chairman Liu cleared his throat again. Mr. Bennett, your father's condition has left a temporary vacuum in the company. There's been discussion about restoring your active role. I saw her again, Ethan interrupted, eyes unfocused. Pardon? Lily. She was in my room last night. He told me my leg is still there. But when I reached for it. He trailed off, visibly shaking. A board member shifted uncomfortably. Another scribbled something in a notebook. Mr. Bennett, one of them said carefully, do you remember what quarter we're in? Ethan smiled faintly. Autumn. It's July. He frowned. Right. Of course. I meant the fiscal moon. Confused silence again. He began humming softly under his breath, tapping the table in erratic rhythm. It was over. Every person in that room knew it. Afterward, Ethan sat slouched in his wheelchair, head bowed, breathing uneven. They laughed at me, he muttered. I crouched beside him, placing a hand on his knee. No one laughed. You did. I tilted my head. No. I didn't. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. You knew this would happen. Didn't you? I paused. Why would I do that? He didn't answer. The car ride back to the hospital was silent until halfway through. Then Ethan spoke, voice low and ragged. I used to be someone. You still are, I replied evenly. He laughed bitterly. No. I'm a sick man. A pathetic cripple with a haunted mind. I didn't respond. He turned his head slowly to face me. You said I could get better. You can. But what if I don't? I placed my hand over his again. Then I'll stay with you anyway. He blinked. Why? I stared straight ahead. Because I haven't finished what I came here to do. He froze. What? I smiled. I mean, because we're friends. He turned his gaze to the window again. But I could feel it, the seed of fear beginning to root inside him. And just like that I knew. He had begun to suspect me. But it was too late. 2 days later, Chairman Liu officially removed Ethan from the succession shortlist. Noah was promoted as acting CEO. The announcement was subtle but absolute. The legacy Ethan once thought was his by birthright was now slipping through his fingers. And he didn't even have the strength to clutch at it. I visited him that evening. He was curled in bed talking to no one. Why would you say that? He whispered into the dark. She was mine. Always mine. I sat beside him, brushing a cold, wet cloth across his forehead. You're not sleeping again, I murmured. They took it all, he said. Who? He stared at me. You. My hand froze. Me. You're not who I thought you were, he said quietly. You never were. I leaned down close to his ear, my voice a whisper meant only for him. Neither are you. He blinked, stunned. Sweet dreams, Ethan, I said as I walked out of the room. He would dream of me. He would dream of Lily. He would dream of everything he destroyed and everyone who now owned him. Ethan was unraveling. I could feel it in every text he didn't send, every word he forgot mid-sentence, every time he called me her by mistake. The medications were doing their work. But it wasn't just chemistry, it was history. Guilt has a flavor that doesn't wash out, and I had made sure he swallowed it whole. Today he called me 8 times in a row. I ignored them all. By nightfall he sent one message. I know. Please come. I just want the truth. I smiled. It was time. The psychiatric hospital had grown familiar, almost comforting. White halls. Blank stares. The same antiseptic buzz humming through the walls. His room was dim when I entered, the curtains drawn, the lights low. Ethan sat in the corner, not on the bed but on the floor, knees drawn to his chest. You came, he croaked. Of course. His eyes were hollow. Shadowed. You've changed. I sat across from him. You just never noticed before. He reached out like a child lost in a nightmare. Tell me the truth. I tilted my head. About what? Everything. So I gave it to him. You never lost your memory in our past life, I said. You pretended. You came back from the accident and told me you loved me. But you never forgot Lily. He froze. You married me, I continued, and then you slowly bled my family dry. You tricked my father into investing everything in a false project. You stood by while he collapsed from a heart attack. I leaned in, voice soft. You threw away the medicine he carried. Ethan's lips parted. No. You left him to die. Then you destroyed the company. Left my mother in a psychiatric ward. And when I had nothing left, you looked me in the eyes and said I had to die so my brother could live. He began to shake. I jumped, Ethan. No. I hit the ground, I whispered. I broke everything. My body. My pride. My soul. His tears began to fall in silence. I smiled gently. But then, I opened my eyes again. I was 19. He blinked slowly in disbelief. You came back. Yes. He began to laugh, soft and broken. You're lying. I'm not. Then this is a dream, he said, curling in on himself. A nightmare. I'll wake up. No, I said. You won't. I stood and walked over to the window, drawing the curtain just slightly to reveal the city lights. You remember the fireworks? I said. Victoria Harbor. You told me they were for my birthday. You looked me in the eyes and said, I only love you now. Ethan blinked up at me. I know now. Lily and I shared the same birthday, I said. His breath hitched. You weren't celebrating me. You were grieving her. He pressed his hands to his ears. I loved you. You loved revenge, I cut in sharply. You loved control. You used me to avenge a girl who was never yours. He sobbed. I crouched down beside him. But you know what's funny, Ethan? He didn't answer. Lily didn't love you either. His eyes shot open. She was with Noah, I said, smiling coldly. Your half-brother. From the beginning. No, he whispered. She played you like a violin. All those tears, all those kisses, they weren't for you. She was helping him get ahead. And when you finally realized that, I leaned in eye to eye. You killed my family for someone who never wanted you. Ethan screamed. He hurled the glass of water at the wall, then collapsed again in a sobbing heap. You're lying. Please, please tell me you're lying. I stood tall and stared down at him. I'm not lying, I said, voice like ice. I'm just letting you feel what I felt. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot and desperate. I'm sorry. Please. I was wrong. We can fix this. I can make it right. He crawled toward me, clutching at my skirt like a beggar. I'll give it all back, he choked. The company. The money. Me. Please, don't leave me here. I slapped him. His body recoiled, stunned. Keep dreaming, I said softly. You think I would have a child with you? You think I would share a future with the man who murdered my father with silence? He whimpered. But You'll never leave this hospital, I whispered. Not while I breathe. You'll spend every day clawing through fog, praying for the face of a girl who's already forgotten you. I stood, brushing my hands clean. You used to say blood debts must be repaid in blood. I smiled faintly. Well, this was mine. I walked to the door. Rachel, wait, please, he begged behind me. I looked back one last time. He was a wreck. Barely a man, nothing like the proud boy who once thought he held the world in his hands. You wanted me to suffer in silence, Ethan, I said. But I made sure you could scream. I made sure you remembered. Then I left. And this time I didn't look back. 1 month later, Noah and I stood on the rooftop of Bennett Enterprises. The city skyline stretched out below us. The summer breeze tousled my hair. No more ghosts, he asked. Just ashes. He handed me a glass of champagne. To rebirth. I clinked it softly. To revenge. We sipped. Below us, the empire Ethan once believed was his now thrived under our names. Somewhere in that locked white building, Ethan sat in a wheelchair, staring at a blank wall, humming fireworks under his breath. And I was finally free. The end.